So, what is the most terrifying Bible prophecy? The most terrifying one. You may disagree here with me, and you may say maybe prophecy of the coming flood to destroy the world. Thousands of years ago, that may have been the most terrifying one. But for me, as I was reading through the Law of Moses recently, I found one specific prophecy that I thought it was rather terrifying and not enjoyable one to read. Too, there's quite a cruel sentiment to it, and let's have a look at it anyway. The most terrifying prophecy in the Bible, the book of Leviticus, chapter 26. God speaks to Israel through Moses, and he gives them blessings and curses. Blessings if they keep in the covenant and remain in a relationship with God. Curse if they turn to other gods and engage in a relationship with them. And these are repeated later on in Deuteronomy, which we'll look at also. So Leviticus chapter 26, verse 29. This is what will happen if they break the covenant. Leviticus 26, 29. You shall eat the flesh of your sons, and you shall eat the flesh of your daughters. Well, for me anyway, this is the most terrifying Bible prophecy. It says to the parents that they'll be eating their children. If you read a few more verses after that, it says, I will destroy your high places, and then that refers to those gods that they will start to worship, not their God, but those false gods. And it's referring that's the reason why it's happening. I will destroy your high places, cut down your incense altars, and cast your carcasses and the lifeless forms of your idols. It's all linked to that relationship, either with God or with the false gods or idols. And my soul shall abhor you. I will lay your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries to desolation. And I will not smell the fragrance of your sweet aromas. Bring your sanctuaries to desolation. That will ring again and again throughout history, talking about the sanctuary. Initially, that was just the tent of the meeting, which was initially positioned at Shiloh in Israel, and that was gone. And then the one in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, that was gone. And then the second temple in Jerusalem, after the time of Jesus, that was also laid waste and desolate. Verse 32 and 33. I will bring the land to desolation, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the nations and draw out the sword after you. Your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. And this prophecy, I will scatter you among the nations, that just rings in the ears again and again throughout history, all the way until the end of history. Even more so than the prophecy about the desolation of the holy place. I will scatter you among the nations. This, for me, in all its cruel sentiment, this for me is the most convincing evidence that the Bible and the law of Moses is true, because this prophecy still thousands of years ago keeps true. And it wasn't just when the Israelites were scattered amongst the other nations uh, through the Babylonian conquest of Judea and Jerusalem. And then they're scattered amongst Persians, they're scattered among Greeks and Romans, and then scattered all around medieval Europe and further throughout the world, even up to this time today. The Jewish people, they're scattered everywhere. It was only in the recent decades, since the 1940s, that there is a state of Israel. But then still, most Jewish people are scattered around the world. And they've been persecuted and killed by every nation, most of the nations, throughout the history, not just the ancient Babylonians and Greeks and whatnot. But throughout the common era, the last 2,000 years, they've been persecuted in every nation where they've been to, and forcefully converted and killed for thousands of years. But they're still around. They're still around. Unbelievable. I mean, any nation that went through things like that has perished long ago, thousands of years ago. There are many nations that were small nations that perished. There's no trace of them. But the Jewish people are still here today after all this. Thousands of years of persecution and destruction. It's incredible, really. Let's go to the repeated laws. Deuteronomy 28. Now, this is the last book of Moses, Deuteronomy, or the repeated laws. And at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses reinforces what he told his people in Leviticus already. Deuteronomy 28, verse 53. 28:53. You shall eat the fruit of your own body, the flesh of your sons and your daughters, whom the Lord your God has given you, in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you. And then you continue to read and talks about people who are sensitive, how even the sensitive people will turn into cruel people. And it's terrible, terrifying, terrifying prophecies. Talk about very sensitive women and sensitive men that turn into cruel people and eat their own children. Now, one way to understand this, and a lot of people interpret this, God Yahweh, the Old Testament Israel God, he was cruel, he was bloodthirsty, genocidal maniac. That's how atheists call him, some atheists anyway. The point of the story is that says the Lord God has given you the children, so God gave them the children as a gift. But they, the people, the Israelites, they will eat their own children because they're oppressed by the enemy. So the interaction between humans causes them to fall so low, hit the rock bottom, and eat their own children. And that's what we find at the end of the law of Moses. Let me read Deuteronomy 31 now, verses 19 to 21. Now therefore, write down this song for yourselves, the song of Moses, and teach it to the children of Israel, put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. When I have brought them to the land flowing with milk and honey, of which I swore to their fathers, and they have eaten and filled themselves and grown fat, then they will turn to other gods and serve them, and they will provoke me and break my covenant. Now, when you come to the end of the story, end of Deuteronomy, it's not like in Leviticus anymore. If you do this, if you do that, there is no if anymore. This is another terrible prophecy. God says, this is guaranteed. This will happen. This will definitely happen. They will forsake my covenant. They will break relationship with me, their true God, and enter into relationship with other gods, false gods. Then it shall be, when many evils and troubles have come upon them, that this song will testify against them as a witness, for it will not be forgotten in the mouths of their descendants. For I know the inclination of their behavior today. So God, I know your hearts today already. And I know that you have already hiding those gods of Egypt in your sacks and bags, on your donkeys and horses. And that's repeated throughout the Old Testament, even to the prophet Ezekiel. They have never left the gods of Egypt behind. And that's just to start with. But later on, they adopt also Canaanite gods when they enter the land. For I know the inclination of their behavior today, even before I have brought them to the land of which I swore to give them. So at this point, it says it's hopeless. The law that I gave you, you will not keep it. The covenant I gave you, established with you, you will not keep it. This will happen. You will break my covenant. You will serve other gods. It's not an if. That's also a terrifying prophecy. Then we come to the time of Jeremiah. And this is when the covenant was broken and dissolved. And you actually don't want to go in the book of Jeremiah, but Jeremiah's Lamentations, or the cry of Jeremiah, as it is translated in some other languages, some other Bibles. But it's the Lamentations after the book of Jeremiah. This is what we read in Lamentations of Jeremiah. Lamentations chapter 2, verse 20. Lamentations 2:20. Lamentations 2:20. See, O Lord, and consider, to whom have you done this? Should the women eat their offspring, the children they have cuddled? Should the priests and prophet be slain in the sanctuary of the Lord? So this is what actually happened. Jeremiah says that this is what he saw, because he was there during the time of siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar. Should the women eat their offspring? So he actually sees this happening, that prophecy that came through Moses. And then Lamentations chapter 4, verses 6 to 10. Lamentations chapter 4, verses 6 to 10. The punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom. Okay, so this is what Jesus also says in a slightly different context to Jerusalem in his day. Since you are worse than Sodom, you're worse than Sodomites. He's speaking to the leaders of Jerusalem in the first century. So the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom, which was overthrown in a moment with no hand to help her. So this was better. Jeremiah says. Sodom was overthrown and destroyed in a moment, just quickly. Sometimes I tell people who have lost their loved ones, some of them who have suddenly gone and died suddenly. I said, look, I've seen so many people suffer in hospitals and care homes. It's a good way to go if you go quickly. And this is what Jeremiah is saying. The punishment of Sodom, it was destroyed by fire from the sky. It was better because it was overthrown in a moment with no hand to help her. Verse 7. Now, her Nazarites were brighter than snow. That's Israel now. And whiter than milk. They are more ruddy in body than rubies, like sapphire in their appearance. Now, their appearance is blacker than soot. They go unrecognized in the streets. Their skin clings to their bones. It has become as dry as wood. Now, this is no exaggeration. This is because of the famine, because of the siege of the city of Jerusalem. Those slain by the sword are better off. Again, if you go quickly, you're better off. Those slain by the sword are better off, Jeremiah says, than those who die of hunger. For these pine away, stricken for lack of the fruits of the field. The hands of the compassionate women, the hands of the compassionate women have cooked their own children. They became food for them in the destruction of the daughter of my people. This is what Jeremiah saw happening in Jerusalem during the siege by the Babylonians. The fulfillment of the most terrifying Bible prophecy. Again, you may disagree. I may think some other prophecy is more terrifying than this. For me personally, this is the most terrifying Bible prophecy that comes to fruition. Again, you can interpret it as some people do, reading the surface. Oh, God is so cruel, this God of Israel. Uh, if you read it in the context, the children are a blessing, a gift from God. And what people do in the time of extreme crisis, when Jerusalem is under siege, people suffer from terrible hunger because of the enemy, people besieging them. People of Israel now turn to the last most terrifying resort, eating their own children. And the prophecy linked to this from the law of Moses tells about the people of Israel, or the Jewish people, being scattered across the nations. And this still holds true. And there's prophecies in the book of Moses, starting there. God promises that he would circumcise their hearts, so they will worship him eventually with their whole hearts, when they seek him with their whole hearts. And this prophecy from Moses again repeated in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the other prophets. And that holds true. There's hope at the end. And we see that even though this is a most terrifying prophecy, there is still some hope there following it. But it certainly shows that the words written by Moses thousands of years ago still, even today, hold true, and shows that no matter how terrifying the words are, the words of the law, the words of Moses, the word of God, is still reliable and telling us the truth, the real truth, the real reality, no matter how harsh it is. It's reliable because it speaks the truth and not lie.